In this episode, we're going to make the choice between the defined approach and the customized approach feel straightforward, because beginners often hear those labels and assume one is advanced and one is basic, or that one is always better. The reality is that both approaches exist for a reason, and the right choice depends on what the organization is doing, how controls are designed, and what kind of evidence can support the outcome. This topic matters because it changes how you evaluate controls, how you document reasoning, and how you defend conclusions when someone asks why you accepted a particular control as meeting the requirement. If you choose the wrong approach, you can create a mismatch between what you tested and what the requirement expects, which makes the assessment fragile. The goal here is to build a clean mental model. What each approach means, how they differ in mindset, and how to select one with confidence and precision. By the end, you should be able to explain the difference in plain language and recognize the signals that tell you which approach is appropriate in a given situation. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Let's start by defining the two approaches in a way that feels practical. The defined approach is the straightforward path where you evaluate the organization against the requirement as it is written, using the testing procedures and expectations associated with that requirement. It is called defined because the standard already defines what is expected and how it is typically validated. When you use the defined approach, you are essentially confirming that the organization implemented the control in the manner the standard describes, and that it is operating effectively. The customized approach is different because it allows an organization to meet the intent of a requirement using controls that are not exactly the same as the defined method, as long as the organization can demonstrate that the alternative control achieves the same security objective. That demonstration is not a casual claim. It is a structured argument supported by evidence and analysis. So the difference is not about being strict versus relaxed. It is about following the standard's prescribed path versus validating an alternative path that still achieves the intended outcome. Both can be rigorous, but they demand different kinds of proof. A useful way to think about this is that the defined approach is like following a recipe, while the customized approach is like cooking a dish with a different technique, but still delivering the same result. If you follow the recipe, it is easier for others to verify that you did it correctly because the steps and expected outcomes are familiar and well understood. If you use a different technique, you might still create a great dish, but you need to explain why your technique works, what risks it addresses, and how you know the result is equivalent. That explanation requires more reasoning and often more evidence. In PCI assessment work, that means the customized approach usually demands a deeper understanding of the security objective and a stronger demonstration that the objective is met. The exam is likely to test whether you understand that extra burden, because a careless customized approach can become a loophole that weakens the standard. Precision means you do not treat customized as a shortcut. You treat it as a disciplined alternative that must be proven. Now, let's explore why an organization might choose the customized approach in the first place, because it is not just for cleverness. Organizations have unique environments, unique architectures, and sometimes unique constraints, and the defined approach might not fit perfectly. For example, a company might use a modern architecture where traditional control descriptions do not map neatly, or they might have a security control that is stronger but different from the standard's typical example. In those cases, forcing the defined approach could lead to awkward workarounds that do not actually improve security. The customized approach exists to allow flexibility while preserving the security objective. But that flexibility is not free, because it increases the need for clear analysis and strong evidence. If an organization cannot explain why their alternative control meets the objective, then the customized approach is not appropriate. A QSA must be able to see both sides, the value of flexibility and the risk of unproven equivalence. That balanced view is what precision looks like. Choosing with precision starts with understanding the idea of a security objective, because objectives are the bridge between requirements and real-world control design. A requirement might specify a particular control method, but underneath that method is an objective, such as preventing unauthorized access, detecting malicious activity, or ensuring systems are configured securely. When you use the defined approach, you are usually validating the objective by validating the prescribed method. When you use the customized approach, you are validating the objective directly, which means you must be able to articulate what the objective is and what threats it addresses. This is why the customized approach can feel harder for beginners, because it requires deeper reasoning about why a requirement exists. If you cannot explain the objective in your own words, you are not ready to evaluate an alternative control confidently. In practice, precision means you start by naming the objective clearly and then evaluating whether the control actually accomplishes it, not whether the control sounds impressive. This keeps you from being dazzled by complexity. Evidence expectations change depending on the approach, and this is one of the most important practical differences. In the defined approach, evidence often focuses on showing that the prescribed control is present and operating as required, which can be validated through a combination of documentation, interviews, and observable system state. In the customized approach, evidence must go beyond presence and operation and show equivalence to the security objective, which often involves deeper analysis. That analysis might include describing the control design, explaining how it mitigates relevant threats, and demonstrating effectiveness through measurable outcomes. This is where targeted risk analysis often becomes part of the story, because you are making a case that the alternative control reduces risk to an acceptable level in line with the requirement's intent. Beginners sometimes assume a customized approach means you get to skip evidence because you are doing something different, but it is usually the opposite. You often need stronger evidence because you are asking the assessor and the relying parties to accept a less standard pattern. Precision means you match the evidence burden to the approach you choose. Another important idea is consistency, because an assessment becomes fragile if you mix approaches without clarity. If you evaluate part of a control using the defined approach and part using the customized approach without explicitly acknowledging what you are doing, your conclusions can become confusing. A QSA needs to be able to explain which approach is being used for which requirement, and why, because that affects what was tested and how results should be interpreted. This is not about creating paperwork. It is about creating a defensible record of your logic. When approaches are mixed informally, it can look like you changed the rules to fit the outcome, even if you did not intend to. Precision also means making sure the organization understands the implications of the approach choice, because the customized approach often requires more effort to document and justify. If the organization is not prepared to support that effort, the approach choice can create friction later. A good QSA anticipates that and aligns expectations early. A common misconception is that the customized approach is always more advanced and therefore always preferable, but that is a misunderstanding of risk and defensibility. Sometimes the defined approach is the best choice precisely because it is well understood and easier to validate consistently. If the organization can meet the defined requirement directly, it often reduces debate and reduces the chance of misunderstandings. The customized approach should be used when it is truly necessary, or when it clearly provides an equivalent or stronger outcome that can be proven. Another misconception is that the customized approach is similar to compensating controls, but they are not the same idea. Compensating controls are typically used when a requirement cannot be met as written, and an alternate control is used to address the risk, often under specific conditions and documentation expectations. Customized approaches are about meeting the objective of a requirement through a different method that is intentionally allowed but still requires disciplined proof. Keeping these ideas distinct helps you answer exam questions accurately and prevents you from choosing the wrong logic under pressure. In terms of exam tactics, questions about defined versus customized often hinge on whether the scenario includes a clear statement of security objective and evidence of effectiveness. If an option suggests using a customized approach without describing how the objective will be met or proven, it is likely weak because it treats customization as a free pass. If an option insists on the defined approach, even when the environment clearly uses a different architecture that can still meet the objective, it might be too rigid. The best answer usually reflects a thoughtful selection. Use the defined approach when the control matches the standard pattern and can be validated directly, and use the customized approach when an alternative exists that can be justified through structured analysis and strong evidence. Pay attention to whether the scenario suggests standardization and repeatability, because those characteristics make the defined approach easier to defend. Also pay attention to whether the organization has the maturity to document and sustain the customized control, because customized controls that are poorly understood or inconsistently applied are hard to defend. Precision also means thinking about the downstream effects of your approach choice on reporting and stakeholder understanding. A relying party reading the final output needs to know what was tested and how conclusions were reached, especially when the approach is customized. If you use the customized approach, your documentation has to explain the rationale clearly enough that it does not look like a loophole. That means the narrative must connect the control to the security objective and show evidence that supports effectiveness. In contrast, when you use the defined approach, your reporting often focuses on confirming that prescribed testing expectations were met. Neither is better by default, but each requires a different style of explanation. If you choose an approach that you cannot explain clearly, you create risk for yourself and for the relying parties, because your conclusions will be harder to defend. This is why precision is not just about picking an approach. It is about picking an approach you can stand behind with clarity and evidence. To wrap up, choosing defined or customized approaches with precision is about matching the assessment method to the organization's control design, while preserving the security objective the requirement is meant to achieve. The defined approach validates the requirement as written through the standard pattern, while the customized approach validates an alternative method by proving it achieves the same objective. Customized is not a shortcut. It typically requires deeper analysis and stronger evidence because you are asking others to accept equivalence. Precision means you understand the objective, you match the evidence burden to the approach, and you document your logic so that a reviewer can follow it. It also means you avoid mixing approaches casually, and you choose the simplest defensible path when the organization can meet it. When you hold this mental model, you can approach related topics like targeted risk analysis and compensating controls with much more clarity, because you will understand how they fit into the broader logic of proving security outcomes.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.